ท่านผู้มีเกียรติทุกท่านคะการประชุมเสวนาของเรากำลังจะเริ่มต้นขึ้นแล้วนะคะสำหรับห่วงสุดท้ายค่ะของวันนี้ดังนั้นอยากจะเรียนเชิญทุกท่านค่ะเมื่อได้ยินเสียงประกาศนี้แล้วอยากเรียนเชิญทุกท่านให้เกียรติกลับเข้าสู่ห้องประชุมนั่งประจำที่ให้เรียบร้อยและค่อยๆเดินทางเข้าสู่การพูดคุยกันในห่วงเวลาสุดท้ายนี้พร้อมๆกันเรียนเชิญท่านผู้มีเกียรติทุกท่านนั่งประจำที่เพื่อที่จะเริ่มต้นการพูดคุยเสวนาแบ่งปันในช่วงท้ายนี้พร้อมๆกันนะคะท่านผู้มีเกียรติทุกท่านคะ Ladies and gentlemen, the comments we are about to commence the last session of today's conference. So, if you hear my voice, please kindly proceed into the conference room. Be seated accordingly, and we will resume the conference right away. Thank you very much. ขอบคุณค่ะ ท่านผู้มีเกียรติทุกท่านคะการประชุมของเรากำลังจะเริ่มต้นในอีกประมาณ2นาทีค่ะอีกประมาณ2นาทีเราจะเริ่มต้นการประชุมของเรานะคะเมื่อทุกอย่างพร้อมเพรียงแล้วเราจะเริ่มต้นทันทีนะคะ Ladies and gentlemen, our conference will resume in 2 minutes. In 2 minutes. Thank you for your patience. Thank you. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to the very last section of today's conference, the first day for Education for All conference. As mentioned earlier throughout the discussion today, we talk about a really essential human rights, the basic human rights, quality education. And that's something that we really do hope to happen and then effectively, and that as a result, because we really hope to reduce the educational gap. So that's the reason why we're coming with this part of the discussion, the last part, that we will figure out a way to expand flexible learning opportunities to elevate educational gap. And I'd like to take this very opportunity to invite Senior Education Officer as UNHCR to be the honorable moderator for this section. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Ms. Jael Shisanya Mararu. Welcome.
Thank you very much. And ladies and gentlemen, I wish to welcome you to this session this afternoon session, expanding flexible learning opportunities to alleviate education gaps. Just to recap on what has happened the whole morning, we have been discussing education and identifying various gaps. We have seen that there's escalating volatility, there are conflicts, there are uncertainties, which require rethinking education, creating more flexible learning pathways for better future. And if we remember, Transforming Education Summit 2022 reminded international communities to urgently address global education crisis. So this afternoon, we shall be talking about education gaps, perhaps to listen in, to know what people are doing in terms of the time, the delivery, logistics, entry requirements, instructional approaches, resources, content, technology, pedagogy, strategy, and the way organizations are done. So I want to welcome our speakers to come on stage so that we can indulge in our discussion this evening. Welcome. Our first speaker is Min Seung Park. Min Seung Park is a program specialist for public relations, international affairs at the National Institute for Lifelong Education, NILE, in the Republic of Korea. With a career dedicated to expanding access to education and fostering global partnerships, she has played a pivotal role in promoting Korean lifelong learning policies and innovative practices, both in Korea and internationally. Min, you're welcome to do your presentation. Thank you.
Good afternoon, and good morning and good evening to those of you who are watching online. Thank you for the kind introduction. My name is Min-Sun Park, Program Specialist at National Institute for Lifelong Education, or NILE in short. And for today's presentation, the presentation will be in two folds. First, I will give you a brief introduction of what NILE does, and also a Korea's approach to providing flexible pathways for higher education. So this is what National Institute for Lifelong Education is. Too long, I'll refer to it as NILE from now on, what we do. So NILE was established in 2008, and we are a public institution directly under the Korean Ministry of Education, which is dedicated for promoting lifelong education and learning for Koreans and, well, basically learning for all. And with our vision to create an inclusive lifelong learning safety net and as well as the learning platform for everyone, we aim to develop a learning ecosystems that work across life in every setting, which benefits everyone through shaping national policies, building capacities for local and national stakeholders, as well as some international stakeholders, to build effective and inclusive lifelong learning systems, implementing diverse educational programs, and providing resources that could support lifelong as well as life-wide learning across all ages. And as you can see, we have a legal basis under the Article 9 of the Korean Lifelong Education Act, and the same act also has a mandate that our institute is supposed to play, which includes conducting surveys, developing programs and national master plans, as well as helping support other institutions across the country to network and establish networks among themselves to help each other as well. And Korea has long been a pioneer in promoting flexible and inclusive education systems. And two of the most notable examples will be the Academic Credit Bank system, or in short, we call this ACBS, and the Bachelor's Degree for Self-Education, or BDS in short. So these are the two initiatives that NIL has in providing alternative pathways to receive a higher education degree. So first of all, let me explain a bit about the Academic Credit Bank system. So this is a lifelong learning initiative which offers alternative pathways for learners to receive higher education degrees. It allows individuals to accumulate academic credits from a variety of learning experiences, which includes formal education, vocational training, online courses, professional work, certificates, as well as among other things. And then these credits can then be combined to earn a academic degree which is recognized by the Minister of Education. And as you can see, we have 6 major sources of credits where the credits can come from, which includes taking courses at a recognized universities, either full-time or part-time, or taking courses at a Ministry of Education accredited institution that provides academic credit bank courses. Or you can also convert your national qualifications as well as the state accredited private qualifications into a certain number of credits. The number of credits will depend on your qualifications as well as the line of the major. These are among the sources that of the credit comes from. And on the right-hand side, there's a flow chart of how this whole system works. Well, let me just be brief. So to use or to get to be a academic credit bank learner, you first need to have at least a high school diploma or equivalent of the high school diploma. And you can prove to be, and you first register with NIL. We have a Center for Academic Credit Bank system. You first register as a learner, and then you can start accumulating credits by either taking courses or converting your qualifications through NIL, etc. And once you have accumulated enough credits for your chosen major or courses, you can apply to get all these credits accumulated into a degree, either associate or bachelor's, depending on your chosen program. And once the center at NIL examines all the credits that has been accumulated and it has been approved, then the learner can get the degree either conferred by the Minister of Education, or in certain cases, they can get a degree under a certain university that they have taken most courses at. This also depends on by learners. And these are how many academic programs that is being offered through the academic credit bank systems. And as you can see, we have 111 majors in 13 associate degree programs and 118 majors in 26 bachelor's degree programs. And most of the degrees, the categories are diverse. You can get a degree in liberal arts, social sciences, engineering, and even in arts and physical education as well. Oh, sorry. So the whole idea for academic credit bank system started back in 1995. with the Presidential Committee on Educational Reforms announced in Korea. And the scheme actually began in March of 1998. So it's roughly almost going 30 years now. And the first degrees were awarded in August of 1999. It started out with 25 bachelor's degrees and 9 associate degrees. And as of this year, we've had more than 1 million degrees accumulated so far. And key features of this academic credit bank system would be it's flexible because learners can accumulate their credits at their own pace. They can take courses, or they can choose to convert their qualifications if it's applicable. And they can also take courses at the different schools, such as vocational schools, universities, or academic credit institutions. And second is the recognition of diverse learning. The system values and it formally recognizes non-traditional ways of learning experiences, such as workplace training and vocational qualifications. And lastly, but probably the most important, is that it bridges educational gaps. The system enables adult learners because you have to be over 18 with a high school diploma, so mostly it's for the adults. The system enables adult learners, professionals, and those who could not pursue higher education through conventional routes right after graduation. It helps them to earn recognized qualifications. The degrees conferred by the Academic Credit Bank is to be treated as equally as the ones that are conferred by the traditional university. And this contributes to reducing the educational gap, particularly for those in marginalized groups. Another scheme which is similar to the Academic Credit Bank system is called Bachelor's Degree Examination for Self-Education. In short, we call this BDS. The difference between the Academic Credit Bank system and another scheme is that under the BDS, the previous system, you actually have to enroll in a certain institutions or either online or offline. But this one, learners can study on their own, but at the end of each stages of their studies, they need to pass the exam, which is administered by NIL or by the state. So basically, those who want to obtain a degree without attending any formal institutions, they can apply to be the BDS learner and start studying independently on their own. And once they pass upon a series of exams, they can be awarded with either bachelor's or associate degrees, depending on their passing of the exam. This scheme actually began earlier than the Academic Credit Bank, this scheme started in 1990 with the law being set in April of 1990. And the first exams were administered in October of 1990 with 6 majors in Korean literature, English literature, business administration, law, mathematics, and home economics. And in 1993, the very first degrees are awarded through this program. Awarding 147 people were awarded a degree. So the key aspects of this program, this scheme, BDS, would be that it is completely independent learning. Unlike the Academic Credit Bank, which you actually have to study at some point under a certain institution, this system encourages learners to be self-motivated, to study on their own pace, and which is providing an alternative to the time and cost commitment of traditional university education. And it's very cost effective because by this one, you actually focus on examinations and rather than a formal learning setting. The scheme offers a very most probably the most affordable pathway to a degree. Because for the BDS, if you are a learner, it only costs you let's see, it costs 18,000 Korean won, which is roughly a 450 baht, to register for an exam. You need to pass 4 exams, which there are 4 stages of the exams, just like the university. University has 4 years. So for the 4 years, 4 exams, it's 80,000 Korean won, or roughly 2,000 baht of the fees. That's all the fees that you pay to get a degree through this program. And as for the academic credit bank system, it also requires a fee to register as a learner when you first register. However, the fees are very small compared to the traditional method of university. To be an academic credit bank learner, the registration fee is 4,000 Korean won, which is roughly 100 baht, Thai baht. And to receive a degree, you need to, at the end of your studies through the academic credit bank system, you need to submit a proposal of approval of the credits that you have received. And that will cost about 1,000 Korean won per credit. So if university is usually 140 credits, so that's roughly 3,500 baht to receive a degree through the academic credit bank system. But however, the system also requires registration at certain university courses or institutions, and these fees vary by universities. So, So these 2 schemes, which look similar, both the academic credit bank system and the bachelor's degree for self-education scheme, they provide a critical avenues or ways for the learners who face barriers in their early life for the traditional education, whether it was the money or the time constraint, and they can now use this pathways to start learning and earn a degree that is recognized socially. It is against the law to discriminate against the degrees that are received through the system. They're treated as equal as the traditional degrees received through the traditional setting. And by promoting these, they're very flexible in these ways, because both programs you can study on your own at your own pace, especially the BDS. And by promoting these flexible, they're very personalized learning pathways, these programs not only expand access to education, but also it helps close educational gap because to those who did not have a chance, which makes a lifelong learning a reality for all. So these are the 2 major lifelong learning schemes that NILE has been implementing for more than 2 decades, even before the NILE started. Well, thank you for your attention.
Thank you very, very much for that presentation. A great presentation there. We have been able to learn that the accredited banking system that accumulates accreditations, the flexibility, the variety of courses that are offered, and the diversity of learning that takes place. Above all, it is important to note that the learner is at the center of it all, that whatever we are doing is around making sure that the learner is taken care of. Thank you very much. Now, I want to introduce our second speaker. Our second speaker is Dr. Jesus C. Insilada, the 2017 Princess Maha Chakri Awadi, and he is from the Philippines. He will be able to speak to us about expanding flexible learning opportunities for indigenous in the Philippines, the PASU program. Welcome.
Thank you for that kind introduction. Masampareng adamadawgan nga kurawan, a greeting in my own language, which means teachers, instructional leaders are empowered, not only empowered, but capacitated and encouraged to come up with approaches that would really fit in with the kind of learners that we cater to. And in doing this, we need the whole community. We need the cultural masters, the council of elders, to help us and learn from indigenous learning systems that they've been applying since time immemorial, especially in community-based learning centers, and that are being sustained through School for the Living Traditions. In this presentation, let us see how these indigenous learning systems are applied in the formal school and how this ILS or indigenous learning systems and methods help close the gaps when it comes to the learning outcomes. This presentation aims to present the Sanyog education program and the Pasibo approach in teaching and their impact to address learning gaps. Sanyog education is a locally designed framework that is to enhance and empower learning-focused initiatives in my district, the district of Calnuguan in the island of Panay, Philippines. While Pasibo approach being part of the banner bigger program Education, Sanyog Education is a method or methodology anchored on ethno-pedagogy, anchored on indigenous learning system in my community. Second aim is to provide a deeper understanding and appreciation of community-based approaches and systems for flexible and lifelong learning. By the way, the Sanyog Education Program is a very young program that we are piloting in my school's district. We have just launched it in the late of July this year, but that program is a product of old programs we've been applying. In my previous schools, for example, we've been implementing the programs on happy leadership and happy teaching. And we try to incorporate this principle to this new program, the Sanyog Education Program. And at the same time, during the pandemic, we're able to champion a program on happy and healthy learning. The Sanyog Education Program, by the way, the word Sanyog is a local term and also used as an acronym. Sanyog would mean to accelerate, to enhance education. The school's district of Calnuguan has designed this learning-focused program that aims to significantly improve learners' achievement in all learning areas by providing mechanisms, initiatives, strategies, and activities that would energize and synergize actions towards desired results. If we're going to count the number of letters in the word Sanyog, there are 6. And there are also 6 action areas. Okay? addressing the different aspects as to the learning of our indigenous learners. Sanyog is a kinaraya Hiligaynon word that means to develop and to transform. When used as a transitive verb to the word education, the phrase means to improve or transform education in specific aspects. As an acronym here, Sanyog stands for critical areas of action to standardize and strengthen remediation and enrichment practices in all learning areas. A stands for articulate academic concerns, address learning gaps, and accelerate literacy and numeracy performance through contextualized initiatives. Negotiate with stakeholders, nurture collaboration, and nourish shared leadership. Why? Yield initial gains, celebrate, and replicate best practices in the protection of instructional time, designing contextualized methods and learning resources, and standardization of 21st century skills and assessment practices. O is to optimize academic outcomes through research and innovation and through the provision of motivating, inclusive, and relevant learning opportunities. And finally, G stands for give support to teachers to grow productively and gain personal and professional fulfillment through a happy and transformative leadership, collaborative engagement, and reflective supervisory practices. And this framework is aligned with the national standards down to the regional and division level. And in coming up with this framework, we consulted the whole community through the culture bearers and the Council of Elders, what they have to say about the framework, and we're able to refine and involve everyone, teachers, parents, learners, and the wider community, including the local government units, government officials, and stakeholders. By the way, today marks a very historic date for the Philippines, and in support to our synergized efforts to accelerate learning recovery in the Philippines, because the President of the Philippines signed today the ARAL law. It is a law focusing on accelerating learning recovery in the Philippines. This is very significant because when it comes to funds, technical support, and other requirements to put everything in place when it comes to a learning recovery, we have the law called the ARA law, or the Learning Recovery Law of the Philippines. In general, the Pasibo innovation, so this is specifically an approach that aims to design, validate, and adopt an innovative teaching approach to address the needs of the indigenous learners. Specifically, the approach, going down to the specific part of the Sanyog program, is this approach designed for the indigenous learners, and it has the following objectives. Number one is to design a comprehensive framework that integrates indigenous knowledge, systems, and practices into the lessons. Two, pilot test and validate the Pasibo approach in select IP-Ed implementing schools. Again, IP-Ed means Indigenous Peoples Education. It is an interfacing curriculum. We have the general curriculum in the formal school, and the IP-Ed curriculum is there to interface. So meaning, we have the formal curriculum, and the IP-Ed curriculum is there while we interface or we contextualize the curriculum. Third is to model the Pasibo approach and encourage school heads and teachers in IP-Ed implementing schools to develop similar culture-based approaches and ethnopedagogies specific to the needs of their indigenous learners. So I am now sharing with you the method, the key steps or stages in the Pasibo approach. Like Sanyog as an acronym, Pasibo is also an acronym. So P stands for the key step number 1, which is to profile and plan. This is very important. It's very important to profile our learners because each and every learner is unique. But in the context of our classes or our set of learners, by the way, in the area, we have 2 recognized indigenous groups, the Panay Bukidnon and the Ati group. So we need to profile who are the members of the Ati community, who are the members of the Panay Bukidnon community. This is very important because we need to identify which culture we are integrating into the lesson since we are catering to 2 groups. Okay? And there are also hybrid classes. Hybrid classes are classes with the presence of the indigenous learners and non-indigenous learners. Using this approach, it is very important for a teacher to profile first what percent comprises the indigenous learners. How about the indigenous learners? Because the Indigenous Peoples Education Program is not only for the indigenous learners. It is for the mainstream class. Sometimes we have 100%, but sometimes we could have 50% or lower than 50%. So it takes a lot of mastery on the part of the teacher on how to cater to the needs of this hybrid class. So that's the main reason why we need to profile and plan. We need to prepare activities and tasks that appeal to mind and mood of our learners. And when we talk about our culture, they will be very interested. When different aspects of culture are integrated into the lesson, everyone is involved. Everyone is excited to share their realities and their experiences. So we need to prepare something that appeals to the mind and mood. In the School for the Living Tradition, this is a school system outside the formal school. They would start the class having through dancing, for example, through beating of the drums or playing different musical instruments to appeal to the mind and mood. And we could also adopt that in the formal school because this Pasibo approach is actually a community-based approach we are trying to apply in the formal classroom. And here are the guide questions. What are the categories of my learners? What is their cultural affiliation? Are they indigenous? Are they non-indigenous? Are they coming from the nearby community? Are they coming from a far-flung area? Their status, everything. No? We could also ask about their strengths, their challenges, their interests, and their prior knowledge. What activities or tasks are effective for my profiled learners? A stands for advance, be guided by the aims, goals, and objectives. Here, we're going to identify national standards and try to come up with local standards as to competencies and objectives. In preparing the lesson plan, we're going to provide the national competency and come up with our unpacked, contextualized, indigenized objective that is specific to the culture of the learners that we cater to. And here are the guide questions. What are the identified objectives, competencies to be developed among the learners? What aspect of culture are in focus or can be integrated into the lesson, and how the contextualized objective competency can be expressed or articulated? What are the appropriate activities, tasks that can be provided to achieve the objectives of the competencies? If we're going to scan, so we have the third key stage, S, and that is the time to establish connection through tasks and thoughts with the objective and competencies. Okay? Number 4 is to include. making abstraction by connecting to what is already known. What are the insights of the learners after accomplishing the activities or tasks in relation to the things that they already know, their realities and their shared experiences? How are the activities or tasks meaningful to the learners? Okay, the key stage number 5 is to build new knowledge, gauge mastery of the competencies through assessment. The most common forms of assessment that we have, of course, a paper and pencil, but by infusing indigenous learning system, we could have authentic assessment. We could have the most common is performance assessment. For example, in the teaching of a traditional dance, performance assessment is most appropriate. And the last is to understand where the application of the knowledge comes in by noting gains and gaps and ways forward. Okay. To continue, I would like to share with you the impact of the Sanyog Education Program. It was simultaneously launched in 23 schools in my district. By the way, I am acting as an instructional leader to the specific public schools district supervisor, and under me are 23 schools from kindergarten to grade 12. More than 100 partners supported for the sustainability of the program, representing the local government units, the Parents Teachers Association, Alumni Association, non-governmental organizations, among others. The Council of Elders expressed their strong support to the Sanyog Education Program and the use of the placebo approach in the classroom. Impact on learning, 98.84%. Got grades of 85 and higher during the first quarter of the school year 2024-2025, with 75 as the passing grade. 0% dropped. Were able to sustain that through the Sanyog Education Program. With the efforts in the past, I'm new in my station, but with the efforts in the past years, they had also 0%, were able to sustain that. 99.21% said that the Sanyog Education Program and the placebo approach are appropriate and are aligned with the national standards and community expectations in addressing local challenges. How do the Sanyog Education Program and the placebo approach provide opportunities for flexible and lifelong learning? First, the framework and methodology of the Sanyog Education Program can be replicated in schools to enhance learning outcomes, especially in schools catering to indigenous learners, and even to implement the program, which is alternative learning system, where we cater to the out-of-school youth in a more flexible setting. So they could also make use of the placebo approach, because most of the learners being catered here are also the indigenous learners. The placebo approach to the first piloted in this school year offered the indigenous people's education that can be adopted by schools catering to hybrid learners, and as what I have mentioned, learning centers offering the alternative learning system program, and learners in the senior high school, grades 11 and 12, and all other kinds of classes. The Sanyog Education and the placebo approach as a community-based innovations encourage collaboration and partnership among all units to achieve its goals and targets. They therefore highlight a more community-based approach to education and a more flexible learning mode towards lifelong learning. The framework and approach also promote inclusive education, skills development and assessment, partnerships, practical application, the infusion of 21st century skills, entrepreneurship and innovation, lifelong learning, youth empowerment, and engagement. And through the introduction of this program and this specific approach, we continue to hope that the whole community would continue to support us with the support of the higher agencies such as the Department of Education. There are 3 points I would like to emphasize in order to sustain this program. First is to continue to support the decentralization of policies in the department. Second is to continue to capacitate the teachers and instructional leaders. And third is to empower the whole community to help for the education of the children and the next generation. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, just on time. That was really, really intriguing. We have learned that it is possible to do indigenous learning, and we have learned that it can help us close the gaps, the learning gaps. It is a lifelong learning. We have learned about standardization, articulation, negotiation, yielding gains, optimizing outcomes, and giving support. It is a unique approach that is centered on culture and is really learner-centered. And one other thing that we have learned is that there's need for a lot of collaboration and a lot of partnership. Thank you very much for that wonderful presentation. Now, our last presentation, our last but not least, is my colleague and the country representative, UNHCR here in Thailand, Ms. Tammy Lynn Sharp. Mrs. Tammy Lynn Sharp has been in Thailand for the last 1 year. Not yet 1 year is not yet complete. She actually comes from Islamabad, so she was my colleague in Islamabad before she moved here to Thailand. She will give just a bit of her experience here before she goes into her presentation. Tammy, you're welcome. Thank you.
Okay, good afternoon, everybody. Sawatika. Yes, I think I'm around 6 months actually, maybe in the next couple of days, coming here to Thailand. And it's a multi-country office for UNHCR here, so it's covering Cambodia, Laos, and Vietnam in addition to Thailand. But the majority of our activities are based here in Thailand. And prior to this, I was coming from Pakistan on that front. And I will need this. Okay. I'm going to talk a little bit more about people, in particular refugees. And I think I was quite fortunate in that Noor spoke, and I don't see her in the audience now, but she was part of the opening session this morning. And so I think she gave you very much an idea of who, when I'm talking about a refugee, and I would like you, while we're here reimagining education, to try and imagine also during part of this what it would mean to be a refugee or to be the parent of a refugee. And for clarity, because there's sometimes the term's not very well understood, a refugee is a person who's crossed an international border and they came and they left their country because of fear of persecution or war in their country. We are talking about 43.7 million refugees, also people who are seeking asylum, seeking refuge, and others who we describe as being in need of international protection. That number grows significantly to 122.6 million if we also add in there IDPs, Palestinians on that front. Unfortunately, this is a common situation. The numbers have been growing dramatically, particularly with the Ukrainian conflict, the situation now in the Middle East with Gaza and Lebanon and Sudan. But it's also quite close, particularly here. We have Myanmar just neighboring, and also not too far, the Afghan situation. And in particular, I want to bring a little bit of focus in this situation to what we call a protracted refugee situation. And that means that somebody's been in exile for 5+ years. Or as we saw with Noor, she didn't flee and cross into an international country. She was born as a refugee. 66% of that 43.7 million people have been refugees for 5+ years, excuse me. I think you can also very much see, and this is very much true with the two protracted refugee situations that we have in Asia, which is the Afghan situation, and then also the Myanmar situation. These are decades-old conflicts. We're talking about people that are third and fourth generations that are in there. You could go here from Bangkok and just drive about 2 hours. If I have my direction right, it would be going west, and you will come to one of the camps. There are a total of 9 camps that are along the border here. It's not a very large number. There's, in those 9 camps, we're talking around 80,000 people. Here in the urban context, we're talking around 6,000 people that have fled to Thailand. And so when we talk about education and refugees, we are also talking about investing in advancing human rights, development, and peace. And it requires an investment that starts from the onset of an emergency and continues till we have a sustainable development outcome. The situation, though, however, is not going to be very encouraging. We've been talking a lot about how to get people in, and refugees are one of the populations that really needs very serious attention. As you will see, the average gross enrollment rate for refugees stand at 38% for pre-primary, 65% for primary. It drops to 41% for secondary, and when we get to tertiary, we're at 6%. Now, if we compare this to the situation with the people, the nationals, what we also call the host communities, you're going to see some very gross disparities between the rates of refugees attending school versus those of the national averages. If we're in primary, you're going to see the males, the boys, are at about 63% to over 100. Females, comparable, 61% to 100. And when we get into secondary, we're looking at 35 to 36 compared to 77 and 76 on that. There are some examples where the averages don't tell the full story. So if you look in the situation of Pakistan or in Bangladesh, you're going to see some very gross discrepancies where we're talking 1% to 75% in Bangladesh, 3% to 45% in Pakistan. The barriers are quite multiple. There's a variety of reasons that we have low attendance rates among the refugee population. Poverty is a main one. A lot of times children are working for the parents. They can be one of the main income earners for the family, or they just can't afford this to go to school if there's high fees. Access is also quite a bit of a challenge. And this, in particular for the Afghans, was very, or still is very much a challenge, particularly when we talk about Afghan girls. It's almost as if the school needs to be visible by the parent for the child to be able to go, particularly for a girl. Then you have issues related to, do you have a reliable power source? Are you connected? Gender. I don't think it's a mystery, particularly when we look at the situation with Afghans. Again, are they allowed to go to school? Is it culturally acceptable for them to be able to go to school? Another deterrent can be whether or not people have the right to work. That's a deterrent here among the people from Myanmar that are in the camps. They're like, why get an education if I don't have the right to work? We saw the same with the Afghans in Pakistan. Disabilities, which were talked about earlier in the previous session, that is also very true for refugees and gets even more challenging because some of the schools are usually very, very basic. Certification can also be quite a bit of a challenge. And this is where UNHCR, in the past, we tried to keep the country of origins curriculum in play. But that brings about a host of challenges, in particular when it comes to certification, because a host government can't certify another country's curriculum and whether or not you've passed. So a lot of times you end up with people not being certified because the country, the government from the country of origin has challenges being able to come and do the testing and look at the situation and issue. And as I think came up and Nora pointed it out earlier, is the question of trauma and how much that impacts you. If you've been a child in particular that's heard some of the violence, the bombing, you've been a witness to extreme violence, or just in the process of fleeing, you could have been separated from a parent. There's a host of different things and how disruptive war and forced displacement can be for a child. We've been growing, I think, a lot. I've been with UNHCR now for more than 25 years, and I've seen an evolution take place in different ways. And there's a lot of changes and some very good practices that have come about. Some I think we could group under policy and planning, and this is very much, can a refugee child, be included in a public school? This can make a range of difference. I just spoke about the certification, so if a refugee child is attending a public school, then they can be able to get the certification that they would like on that front. We also, in some areas, particularly many refugees live in very remote areas, so a local school is not nearby. A lot of times UNHCR supports schools, and actually some of the locals from the host community will actually attend a refugee school. In those cases, we need to keep those schools alive, but we also need to be working with the communities for them to be able to develop their own learning centers and see how that can work on that front. Language can be quite a bit of a challenge for people. This is a situation here when I spoke about the 6,000 refugees here in Bangkok. Public school here, the Thais have a policy called Education for All, so the refugee children can go, but language is going to be in Thai. And so if you don't have that Thai language, that can create quite a bit of a challenge. Here, to kind of help us get over that, we've been doing language instructions and bringing that in with the children, and so that helps them to be able to move forward. We've also used a lot of times, we've spoken a lot about flexible programs and different things. Vocational training has also been a way to be able to help people continue on and to be able to find different ways and work in areas where it's usually they have the right to work and where they can move ahead. We've worked a lot with UNICEF, and that partnership is very long, and it's even grown quite recently where we've been developing, where we have strategic frameworks, and here we've been able to tap into their expertise and bring that into the refugee community. We did this in Pakistan, for example, with the Accelerated Learning Program. This was able to help children who had dropped out but were older now be able to kind of get back in, have a training that's adapted for their age level that helps them to expedite and then get back into the school system where they're at. And it really has proven to be quite effective and is a really good way to be moving forward. There's been quite a bit of discussion about SDG 4. I haven't heard myself, nobody talk about leave no one behind. This is where I think it's really important. It's also an element of the SDGs, and for the refugee community, it's critical. And how we can make sure that the refugees, if we do reach those goals, they are also part of that and that no one will be left behind. Back in 2019, UNHCR put forward a global compact on refugees that was adopted by the General Assembly. And out of that, and one of the agreements was to set up a global refugee forum that takes place every 4 years. And here we've also started to have where any range of actors, an individual, a government, it can be the government from the country that people fled, it can be the government where people are hosted, it could be a donor government, it could be an NGO. They can come forward and put forward pledges. And these pledges are really helping us to be able to keep motivation going, to help our own advocacy, and to be able to draw on a large crowd and a large group of people, such as many of you here coming from a range of governments or different branches of civil society. And at this last, it was in 2023, we had the last Global Refugee Forum, and there we had 3 multi-stakeholder pledges for education. One was about the connected education, how to make sure refugees can also benefit from these types of opportunities. The inclusion in national education that I've emphasized quite a bit. We also have a goal that's called 15% by 2030. And here we are really hoping to get the numbers up to 15% of refugees enrolled in higher education by 2030. To give you an idea, because that sounds like a low bar, but it was 1% in 2019 and it was 6% in 2023. Another area is the financing. And here we do need a lot of support. We can advocate for governments to offer, the same levels of fees, have access to scholarships for refugees, but it can still be quite daunting to be able to afford a higher education or to stay into school. One of the main programs that we've had, and it's 32 years old, it was originally started by the Germans, is what we call DAFI. And over those 32 years, it's reached 26,300 students in 59 countries. We need this to continue growing, however. Right now in 2023, we had 9,312, of which 42% were women. However, in that same year, that only represented 12% of the demand. We had 15,600 applications where we only had 1,942 scholarships. We need to keep that going. And to be able to build on that, we have quite a few systems in place. With the Philippines is actually one example where they actually offer opportunities for refugees to come and study in their country. There are other countries that do the same thing. We call this a complementary pathway. We also have countries that will offer visas for people to be able to come and work. This is also turning out to be quite a bit of a change in offering solutions for people to be able to move forward. Coordination with universities is growing and other forms of educational institutional support. When we come to equity and inclusion, and knowing my time is coming down, I did want to also talk about cash-based interventions. And here we have also been trying very much to kind of use a little bit of a cash support, particularly at the primary level, and particularly with girls, to be able to keep them into schools. And it's still very new and it's still growing, but we're seeing that this actually is starting to have some really good impact. Some last good practices, and a lot of these have kind of been discussed today, so I won't go into much, but it's that innovation, it's that connected learning, digital, that has come up in quite a few different places. Coursera is actually working in all of the countries in Asia Pacific where there are refugees. This is opening up many opportunities, and there is a refugee-connected education challenge that I had mentioned as part of the Global Refugee Forum. In ending, allow me just to quickly do a quick call for action that kind of summarizes many of the points that have come up throughout, that we need to increase access. And we also, which is very much tied, we need to eliminate policy barriers for that. A lot of these can be rules and laws that are in place that may not mean to be discriminatory, but end up having that discriminatory impact. And we need to work closely with governments to be able to eliminate that and open up the space for refugees to move freely, to be able to go to all the schools, and to be able to have access to their certificates as well as work opportunities. We also need to keep that pipeline going. And this is one of the biggest challenges, particularly for a humanitarian actor, and this is where we need the partnership with development. Because we can start a humanitarian program at the primary level, but if we can't keep it through, we can see the dropout rates that will come about on that. And this is where we need to keep that moving. Let people get the full education and still ensure that they can get a job. That is also quite a bit of a gap. And it relies upon what we call a whole of society approach, where we can all work together to try and make this work. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Tammy. Thank you for that presentation. And now we are coming to a close of our session. And just to recap that what has actually come out through the talk is that there is what we look at as flexible learning has to be learner-centered. We have to consider the context and the situations. We have to look at the various dimensions, which I talked about right at the beginning. And we have seen that it's possible for us to bridge that gap to limit it. So now we are coming to the session of question and answers. I will ask from the group, just before we go to the group, I have one question from online. And perhaps I will be asking colleagues if you have the microphone. Yes. If you can be able to respond, this question goes to all of you. You can take turns to do your response. How can we overcome the limitations of flexible learning streams? How can we overcome the limitations of flexible learning streams? Any of you can go first.
I'm not sure I fully understand or if...
Because we've been discussing flexible learning. So my understanding is that the person is asking, there are, of course, limitations as far as this is concerned. How can we overcome those? Anyone can pick it up? Yes.
I'll give one answer that I think is really important, is to talk to those people who are not benefiting. I think usually the people who are the most affected usually have some of the best ideas on how to change that and address some of the gaps that are there on that front.
Yeah. Talking about the limitations of flexible learning, it's very important to ask how flexible is flexible. Because talking about methodologies of flexible learning, we need to consider which approaches are applicable to a specific setting. Like, for example, applying flexible learning methodologies in the formal classroom. Of course, we need to have some structure. So that's why flexible methodologies would have structure, because in the formal school, we are more or less structured. But at some point, there must be some flexibilities. So it's a case-to-case basis on how to overcome the limitations of applying flexible learning methodologies. Depending on using the principles I presented, we need to consider a lot of factors. Just for example, the kind of learners that we cater to, the available resources, and so on and so forth. So we need to negotiate. We need to come up at a certain point how flexible, as to what degree flexible learning is flexible when applied to a specific context. So it's a case-to-case basis to overcome limitations. And again, the decision lies on the curriculum implementers because they know best they know what's best for their learners. They know so much. They know so much that it's best for their learners.
Well, I'm not sure if I got the understood the question correctly, but coming from the policy side of probably we're the only ones actually more like implementing, I would say adapt and adopt. Flexible learning, of course, it has its limitations. However flexible it can be, there's always going to be limitations to a certain group of people. Then I would say we will quickly try to adopt these people into the hindsight, and then try to adopt them into the program in a way make it more flexible and change the things as needed. I'm not sure if that answered the question correctly, but
Thank you very much. I believe you have tried, and the person who has asked it online must have been able to understand the response. From the audience, if we have any questions, please you stand and use the microphone. Do we have any question? I could also use this opportunity to just ask our colleague from the Philippines, how do you envisage rolling out the program, which is very intense, very, very promising? If we can have 0% dropout, then this is the program that we should really replicate. So what are the challenges that you foresee, and what are your thoughts about rolling it out? Thank you.
It's on the sustainability because I and my team would transfer to other areas also. School leaders, instructional leaders come and go, but what is important is that we'd be able to involve everyone, having the community own the program, and I think we're able to achieve 0% dropout. It's because everyone was involved. Everyone was aware that the main goal of the program is to accelerate learning outcomes and to achieve 0% dropout. Everyone should be in school, and everyone is aware that every unit has roles to play. From the learners themselves, they need to be responsible for their learning. The parents, their roles, significant roles to support the studies of their children, teachers, officials, local government units, and all stakeholders. We try as much as we can to involve everyone because education is the responsibility of all the units in the community.
Thank you very much. And perhaps to Tammy, one question for you. How do you foresee inclusive education situations going forward, bearing in mind the political status of the world? How do you foresee inclusivity?
I think it's a Dawn. It's a Dawn. Hello. Okay. It's a daunting question. It's one that is, I think in the last couple of the post positions I've been in, it's one that you're constantly engaging. And one of the big challenges is that many governments are looking at the situation domestically and the challenges they have there and trying to balance, because it's very hard to take people from outside and try and prioritize them when your own nationals are struggling. And so it's trying to find that balance, and I think it comes very much to international solidarity, where we rely heavily upon donor communities to be able to complement that and to be able to help governments that are on the forefront of receiving refugees, because I think it's about 3/4 of the world's refugee population are actually in developing countries, middle income and lower middle income countries on that. I think we're also seeing quite a few new opportunities with the connectivity. And as the internet becomes more and more reliable and accessible, even in remote areas, that's opening up a lot of new opportunities for people to be able to take it forward.
Thank you very much. Allow me to thank our speakers and to really appreciate you for the time and the presentations that you have made, and for you, the audience, for being available to listen to us. There is one question. Oh, yes, sorry. Thank you. We can have that. We can take another question.
Yeah. Namaste. I think some of the quiet was also because of the dilemma, Tammy, you brought in front of us, because there are no quick solutions, and you get into start thinking about that. How do you, what can be done? I mean, immediately I think it sort of consumes you. So, and I congratulate all three of you for, bringing reimagining and co-creating for, if you say indigenous, how can you make it interesting? How can you do it? But you did it. You thought of new ways that would help. And same for Min. I have a question for you. And it is about that you talked of certain number who have got their degrees, those who have got the degrees. I just would like to know, it would add value to what you said, that what are those people doing? Are they in normal streams? Are they working? Are they getting about? So what after pursuing are they, can you tell us a little bit more on that? Thank you.
Well, I think there is no official survey done for, there has been some surveys unofficially conducted, and we see many numbers actually use their degrees received through the two initiatives to go to graduate schools or to apply for a certain professions which requires a degree, for example, like law and engineering. And a lot of them actually are now using this scheme to receive a second degree on top of their first degree, which they may have received from a field they did not want to pursue in the first place, or they did not, well, their parents sent them to as an Asian context. So that's a trend we're seeing. But we're also seeing some people who took this chance to get a job which would otherwise would have required you to pay a lot of money to receive, for example, like a medical, not the doctor, but the nursing. Yeah, we have a nursing degree. So these kind of professions. So that's one way of how these graduates are using their degrees.
There's another question? Sure, go ahead.
Actually, it's not my question. It says this gentleman asked, but basically in Thailand there is a quite perception that formal education has more value comparing to the flexible education. So in Korea, in international perspective, can you share your experience and your visions on this? Besides, how can you make a measurement to standardize in order to make sure that people, no matter they graduate from formal education or whatever kind of education, they have get the same acceptance from the society? Thank you.
As I mentioned, in theory, it is socially acceptable. The degrees received through the alternative pathways are socially accepted. However, in practice, there are still stigmas for the degree that are received through the systems. However, society is actually changing. We're seeing a lot of people who have received their degrees through these two systems, or to other systems like open universities, using that degree to enter a competitive job market, and they're now being touted as the success. So the society is slow, but it's changing now. It's becoming more practical. And also we are trying to make these two degrees competitive as possible, to trying to keep its standards as high as possible. Maybe not as high as the most competitive universities. However, it has a certain standards that it meets. And now it's being accepted more and more by the graduate schools overseas as well, which also implies that they have seen these students or these learners who receive their degrees through the systems have met the certain qualities or certain standards that are required. So I guess it will take time. It took us more than 20. It's almost 30 years now. And when I was still a university student back about 20 years ago, people didn't like the degrees received through the academic. They thought that these people were either lazy or they're just too poor. But nowadays, a lot of people, even the middle class, or a lot of people actually take these courses as their first university degree as well, because they want to save time, they want to save money, they're becoming more practical. So in a way, in a sense, it will take time, but it will take an effort for the society as well as the institution that implies these initiatives to work together to change the perspectives.
All right, so we now wrap up, and perhaps we give a hand clap to our speakers. And I hand over the session back to the moderator.
And now big round of applause, ladies and gentlemen, to our honorable moderator, Ms. Chisanya. Thank you. Shall we have a group photo, please? Because I'd like to keep this memory lasting forever, because it's really hard to get all of these influential figures in the industry just get together. It's not easy at all. And yes, ladies and gentlemen, no one size fits all. No, it's slow, but we are getting there. And of course, there's no one solution, absolute solution for every issues that we have. But we are getting there, right? So that's a good sign, and it's happening because we have all of you. So, ladies and gentlemen, another big round of applause for everyone here on stage and for you yourself. Thank you very much. I'd like to inform all ladies and gentlemen a little bit about something special tonight. Let's just have dinner together, shall we? So next door, we organize a reception dinner for all ladies and gentlemen. It will commence around 6 p.m. onwards, 6 onwards. And for tomorrow, I guess you might still remember what's going to be the time we're going to kick off the tomorrow conference. So registration start at 8:30.